Hello and welcome to Pokemonth, where I try and make up for close to 5.5 years of barely mentioning Pokemon by mentioning Pokemon more, like a lot more. As in, if you don't like Pokemon, there's the door. You should probably use it, because you're not going to like where we're going for the best part of a month.
And you know what Pokemon's been doing pretty consistently over the past 20 years? Making Pikachu thinner and Snorlax more active, but also pitting a ridiculous array of Pokemon against each other in an endless confrontation that'll only end once we've appeased the great god Imhotep. That's why each game has 8 gym leaders and a bunch more Elite Four battles. It's all just some elaborate ritual. I'll make the theory video later, okay? It's important to note that while the title says boss fights, we all know what that really means. But I didn't want to limit myself to only gym leaders and Elite Four members. Looking through the series, I found a bunch of one-off fights against important people that I can't discount for a video like this. That's why we've got this clumsy title. Still, better than calling it something like Top 10 Outrageous Gym Leaders that Pokemon doesn't want you to know about. That'd be stupid. What are we talking about again? Every individual position in the roster of gym leaders in a Pokemon game is important, but really, you should be putting the most effort into the 1st and 8th gym leaders in every region. For polarizing reasons really, you want a good start to keep the player interested and momentum moving in the right direction, and the best way to showcase your growth through the game is a properly engaging final gym battle. Somewhere on the lines of, hey, I know you're challenging the Elite Four soon, but you need to work for this last badge. Best way of making things tricky? Dragon-type gym leader. Start as you mean to go on. So a lot of people really don't like Claire from Gen 2, and for the life of me, I can't work out why. Because she's hard as balls? Newsflash, games are supposed to get harder as you go along. If anything, Claire is just making up for all these piss-easy Johto gym leaders who surrender their badges as soon as you look at them funny. Nah, a Dragon-type gym leader is just the challenge you need at this stage in the game, and Claire comes through one of the most memorable fights in this game. In Gen 2, you can get by through using one of the handily placed ice Pokemon, only to be brought to a grinding halt by her Kingdra. This thing is an absolute bastard to take down, only taking serious damage from other Dragon-type Pokemon which you almost certainly don't have at any high level. In Gen 4 there's easier ways around it, but her Dragonairs have all sorts of bullshit moves to showcase the awesome strength of Dragon-type Pokemon. But mostly just to ruin your day. In a nice way though, when you do get through to the other side and stride off to Victory Road, you can do so knowing that you've done it the hard way. Previous gen had fucking ground types of 500 million weaknesses for a final gym. Get the fuck out of my way, Giovanni, got proper challenges to take on. It's easy to get bogged down too much in Pokemon with perfect team composition and trying to play to each Pokemon's strengths and weaknesses. Definitely a time and place for it, but I appreciate a game that's self-aware. On the one hand, we have the imposing Cypher admins from Pokemon Colosseum with intense theme music and fucking legendary dogs. On the other, we have your god and mine, Mirror B. Heroes come in all different shapes and sizes.
It's been a little while since I last played it, but I remember Pokemon Colosseum being quite a serious game. Shadow Pokemon are deeply corrupted versions of regular Pokemon that you steal off the bad guys using your robot arm and your magical assistant. Sometimes in games as serious as this, that's when you need comic relief the most.
Do you know what job that went into this game that I wanted to witness the most? Writing and recording Mirror B's theme music. I don't care how dire the situation is, everything can be solved by just rolling your R's a bit more. Everyone sees a bit of Mirror B in themselves. Not sure I could grow the hair, but hey, that's what wigs are for. And his presence here is the kind of levity this game needed. The man clearly loves Ludicolo's, and why should he put proper team composition ahead of personal preference? You got all these scary admins and their legendaries, but the real fun, to the point where this is the only admin fight I can really remember, comes from the man with the Pokeball afro. Ludicolo's will inherit the earth and there's nothing you can do about it. I don't want to say that I was underwhelmed by Black and White 2 since my expectations were pretty low going into the main series' first proper sequel, but I can't really remember a whole lot about it. They changed a few gym leaders around and made Sharon one for some reason, but on the whole, not the most memorable experience for me. But at least this generation as a whole had an interesting lineup of characters. Team Plasma went around talking about liberating Pokemon, but in Black and White 2 they're under the new leadership of some guy called Colress. Colress, who's less into freeing Pokemon from the control of their trainer and instead interested in the bond between the two and how exactly it works. Almost a noble cause, but he's still the leader of a revived Team Plasma, which means it isn't long until you're fighting him properly. First thing to notice is, oh man, that's one sick beat you got there, Colress. I don't even care that you've got a team full of sciencey Pokemon, I'm just fixated on music that has human English words in it. You might think that there's nothing special about this fight and that there's half a dozen better battles in this game. However, I disagree. There's a dynamic here that no other fight has been able to achieve before. A kind of clinical analysis of how Pokemon battling works. So instead of fighting for the fate of the world or going for gym badges, it feels like you're feeding Colress more material for his research. He's not such a bad guy. Team Plasma in general weren't so bad. They had pretty funky music too. Must be a trend. Important trainer battles in the GameCube Pokemon games had an added layer of complexity to them in the form of Shadow Pokemon. You can rock up with what you think is a team of world beaters, but if you want even better Pokemon or to complete the game 100%, you have to take a step back, wear down a Shadow Pokemon without knocking it out, and steal it. Not so bad when there's only one, but Greevil at the end of XD Gale of Darkness has a whole party full of them, including the legendary birds. Might want to tone it down just a tad. Here we go. At the end of the other game, Pokemon Colosseum, you find yourself face to face with the bumbling mayor of Phenac City, who reveals himself to be the head of Cypher, not that Cypher, an evil syndicate with plans of world domination who also dress like fucking idiots. Evice here only has one Shadow Pokemon to worry about. It's a Tyranitar, and I remember having trouble catching it, but I think that's almost all down to the rest of his team. You see, battles in this game are always double battles, and really any combination of the rest of his team is gonna make things very hard for you. That Slaking in particular is a fucking monster. Great way of seeing how underleveled you might be as it wipes your team. And I really like how Evice came about, even ignoring what shock value there might be in someone as harmless as Escade. That's a name. Someone this harmless being a criminal leader, but goddamn, his design makes him look like a new Neo Eggman, and I love it. You better have held on to that Master Ball. When it comes to evil teams, a lot of people get on Team Galactic's back, and I'm not entirely sure why. I was researching bad villains for a countdown not so long ago, and they turned up so often. You people are aware that Team Flare are a thing, yeah? But no, Team Galactic are alright. Bit of a bunch of space cases, but they've got ambition and the manpower, Pokepower, to do it. And then there's the head honcho himself, Cyrus, who you don't see a ton of in Diamond and Pearl, but is part of Platinum's startup intro, so you know he means business this time. This is where he takes his idea of destroying the universe only to rebuild it in his image and actually does something about it. Suddenly, he needs stopping. And what a place to do it. Pokemon has never gotten any wackier than Platinum's Distortion World, and it makes the perfect backdrop for arguably the most important battle in the franchise's history. Cyrus here is trying to use Giratina to tear some holes in the universe, and while it may seem like a Pokemon battle is hardly going to discourage him, what else have you got? His team is varied enough, and the usual inclusions of Pokemon like Gyarados, Crobat, and Houndoom serve to give it an air of familiarity, but also his Weavile, which at this stage of the game you're probably not going to outspeed, so hope for the best. Gotta do what needs to be done against this Psycho who doesn't even have eyebrows. Never trust anyone who doesn't have eyebrows. It's been a while since I've said it, so it won't feel like I'm repeating myself, but I feel like I speak for most people, except for those who exist solely to point out that they didn't struggle in any aspect and that their dicks are absolutely massive. Fuck Whitney. Fuck all of it. Every single tiny facet of this gym fight, although the Clefairy Easter egg is pretty cool. Having a normal type gym leader as the second big challenge in a game with not too many options to take her down is such a bad idea, but also a grossly misguided one. I say that because it's really not that hard to make a normal type gym if you play your cards right and generally don't use Miltank. Norman, or Daddy, from Gen 3 did have a lot of build up and external significance, but there's so much more than that to it. First point of significance is holy shit, Slakins are so scary, have I mentioned that yet? And not in the same way that Whitney's Miltank is. Fighting an obscenely strong Pokemon that fucks off every other turn brings up a chance to throw some tactics around and see what sticks. You can try and go toe-to-toe with something that has this much attack, but use Protect every other turn, and now you're using your brain to get around it, which feels better. And yeah, I guess I should go further with Norman's relation to you as a trainer. Any time where you walk past a gym that you can't challenge, only to return later with 4 badges under your belt and a team full of terrifying Pokemon, it's so satisfying. I fought all of these trainers, it's just a very fun gym in general. You made a normal type gym entertaining. How the fuck did that happen? Alright, so Colress was cool, I don't think there's too much disputing that. But you can't get away from the fact that he's a stand-in villain, who isn't much of a villain anyway. For some real fireworks, you can take a trip back to the first load of Gen 5 games and the brunt of Plasma's craziness where they were doing their preaching behind N and Ghetsis. Very different ideologies, but since they're both part of the same boss fight or collection of boss fights, they blend together to make the kind of experience that Pokemon had never seen up until this moment. A battle gauntlet that just keeps on going. Even ignoring the fact that you're thrown for a loop by N beating the league champion and Plasma's base rising from the ground, I have many questions about this. The back-to-back battles you have with the relevant legendary Pokemon, N with both sides potentially using legendaries, and then a grueling fight against Ghetsis and his illegal Hydreigon, it's an unbelievable finale. I guess if you're an idiot you can refuse to hold on to your captured legendary and deny yourself the timeless battle between two very strong Pokemon, but any sins you commit are comprehensively punished by Ghetsis. The man's on a rampage. He just told his adopted son that he was deceiving him all along, and now he's throwing a bunch of really strong Pokemon at you before you have time to take in what's happened before this. It's a ridiculous scenario, but I feel like it does overshadow fighting the champion when you do eventually get around to that. Hey Alder, you got any legendaries? Volcarona isn't a legendary, get out of here. You don't even have any illegal Pokemon. What do you even do? You wouldn't have thought that atmosphere would be important or even possible to craft for a good Pokemon battle, but after a while they all tend to blend together. Anything that helps it stand out is going to be pretty handy. I've stated a few times now that Gen 2 is one of the best post-games in the whole franchise, where your reward for beating the crap out of Johto's Pokemon League is to have a crack at Kanto's Pokemon League. Sadly you don't get a go at Kanto's Elite Four, but Blue's been demoted to babysit Viridian, so you at least get that fight. For a proper conclusion to this epic quest, you gotta go up a big-ass mountain.
One of the greatest benefits of remaking a game with better graphics is that scenarios that were relatively simple are made about 1 billion times more cinematic. Think to the reveal of Kyogre and Groudon in Ruby and Sapphire compared to the remakes. Fighting Red in Heart Gold and Soul Silver is fucking majestic.
For a while I didn't want to play these games because I thought they'd do a crap job of remaking one of the most cherished games from my childhood. In the end they did a lot of things brilliantly well, but holy balls! Rock climbing to the top of a snowy Mount Silver and fighting the silent protagonist from the previous incredibly iconic generation of Pokemon is like something out of an over-the-top samurai film. Still pretty handy in Gold Silver Crystal though. His Pikachu isn't much of a problem, but fully evolved starters, an Espeon and a Snorlax? Yeah, that's what a final challenge looks like. Ain't it wonderful? The best fights in Pokemon always have some kind of theme to them. It helps push them above the rank and file of others and stand above them as the yardstick to follow. Simply put, no fight in the series has had as much build-up as the fight against the newly crowned champion of Kanto, who also just happens to be your long-term rival during your adventure and someone you've grown to know and hate. It doesn't sound surprising nowadays, but back in the 90s I'm sure this was the revelation of a lifetime and sets up one final, ridiculously awesome fight. Made especially interesting considering that no other trainer in the game has as much variety in their team selection. The Elite Four is already a bit of a tricky proposition since you've got to deal with 4 trainers who specialise in some really awkward types, but it's topped off perfectly by Blue, or Gary, or Giggles. This guy's team covers so many bases that you really need a good composition of your own to stand a chance. The fact that it's the climax of a game-long rivalry just makes the eventual victory all the sweeter. To finally put your rival in his place, having been one step behind him the whole way, it is the best ending you could have hoped for. So it's worth pointing out that other than your rival at the end of the first generation of Pokemon, every other Pokemon League champion has specialised in a specific type. Lance and Iris had dragons, Steve and Wallace had steel and water Pokemon respectively, and even Alder was packing a bunch of bug Pokemon. It's not such a problem since they picked strong Pokemon, and the only other champion to buck the trend, Diantha, was one of the easiest final fights in any Pokemon game. But I always preferred it when champions diversified their lineup. Of course, I've forgotten about one other, but only because it underlines my point half a dozen times in red marker pen. Becoming the champion in Sinnoh doesn't come easy. You can't really match the dynamic of fighting your long-term rival at the end of a long journey, but while you go into that battle with steely determination, fighting Cynthia is more like riding a roller coaster without a restraint. You can try and prepare for it, and bringing with you a strong ice type comes in handy, but I'm fairly certain that there's never been a more ruthless team composition in all of the main series. In Platinum, none of her Pokemon share a type, which just means that getting a team together to take her down is a full-time job. At least the Elite Four challenge up to that point is practically free experience, but oh man, waiting for you at the end is a fight that involves a Spiritomb, a Pokemon with no weaknesses, a Milotic, a bulky Pokemon that takes a bunch of hits that was the centerpiece of another champion's team, and a Garchomp, which is just there to smash you out of existence and generally ruin your day in every conceivable way. Do you remember that one champion that had loads of water Pokemon? Yeah, that was easy. I miss that.
This is Rabbid Luigi, and when Gen 4 is remade, not if, when, this battle and basically everything involving Cyrus will be made more cinematic and ridiculous. But it's also worth remembering that Cynthia has a Pokemon that can Mega Evolve. Now, it does depend if they carry over Mega Evolutions to the Gen 4 remakes, but if they do, Mega Garchomp will fuck you up.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. Did you enjoy that? If you did, good. Got a whole 3.5 weeks more of similar content to come. Planning Pokemonth is the kind of thing where you start in August or September, do very little, and then throw everything together like a week before it starts. Not such a problem this year because I've been doing 4 videos a week for a little while now, but that midweek side video is its own problem. Then again, the only one I've made so far was about ROM hacks and people seem to enjoy that. You know, momentum is important, it helps the world go round.